these men who have never been charged with anything and have been cleared for release are still being held. 16 of them told years and years ago, as long as 16 years ago, that they were free to go. Well, wait a minute, they actually weren't free to go. They were cleared for release, and they're still in Guantanamo. What's more, we heard 2 weeks ago that some calamity happened at Guantanamo and a lot of prisoners had to be evacuated to another section of the prison. So far, it's not clear at all what happened. This is a prison the U.S. under the Biden administration just put tens of millions of dollars into rehabbing. It costs about $5 million to keep one prisoner there for 1 year. And almost all of them have never been charged with anything. Figure that out. Don't forget, you're in New York City, the biggest city of the land of freedom and democracy. We're not going to let people forget that. Where's the freedom? Where's the democracy? The global vigil to close Guantanamo now is happening today around the world, in places where people care about humanity and are demanding freedom for men held all these years, up to 23 years, without being charged. Now, yes, there were a few prisoners who have been charged, and the United States just agreed to make a plea deal with them, and the prisoners agreed that they would spend the rest of their lives in prison if they pled guilty to some of the things the U.S. charged. But what happened with that? You all know, who follow the news, that the Secretary of Defense, better called the Secretary of War Making, backed out of that deal and said, oh no, we're going to put these guys on trial because the 9/11 families, and he spoke as if the 9/11 families are all one family and all agree on everything. No, they wanted more punishment. They want the death penalty, and they're not going to settle for justice in this case. So yes, there are some men in Guantanamo right now who are ready to plead guilty to some things in connection with 9/11. But the U.S., the military, and the U.S. administration won't settle for that. They want to hold everybody. And what's more, and this is the whole reason Guantanamo is still open, I believe, they want a place in the world that is free from the law. That the U.S. laws and the thing that people think exists in this Constitution, in this land of freedom and democracy, that you have the right to defend yourselves against charges. You have the right to be told what the charges are, and you have the right to mount a defense and possibly defeat those charges if the trial is fair. But you're supposed to have a right to a fair trial in this country. Now,
even in civil court, some of the things are not guarded, you know that? Some of the practice law and statutes in Supreme Civil are not guarded, just like it's not guarded in
yeah, I mean, this system was set up hundreds of years ago.
Right.
And one of the things that we have found with Guantanamo has been brought home and even existed for decades and decades. In New York City, the land of freedom and democracy, the Rikers Island prison, where more than 5,000 people, men and women, and increasing numbers of women, are kept, sometimes for years, sometimes with charges, sometimes with trials, not. 700 women have just charged the guards at Rikers, the New York City prison, holding people under freedom and democracy with sexual abuse.
Outrageous.
700 women. And those are just the ones who have spoken up and filed suit. Imagine how many women, young people, men, young boys, transgender people have been abused in that prison. Right over there, right in that river, Rikers Island. We ought to know and feel about Guantanamo because we know about Rikers Island. And if we don't know, it's because maybe we're willfully ignorant, and maybe we are willfully ignorant. But it's happening, and it's part of this bargain we make with the government to make people feel safe. You are not safe from the people that did 9/11. They're locked up, they're dead, they died. How is justice going to come from keeping other people in prison for their whole lives? This has me worked up today. I don't know. We are out here every month demanding the prison torture camp set up by George Bush, Dick Cheney, Donald Rumsfeld, kept open by Barack Obama, Joe Genocide Biden, kept open, and he threatened to expand it. The guy with the orange hair, I don't really want to talk about him. Anyway, he wants to lock more people up in Guantanamo. And what about the current president, Genocide Joe Biden? He said he was, they all say, all the Democrats, we're going to close Guantanamo right away. No, they haven't. What about the presidential candidate? Is she talking about it? Is she making promises? No, I'll tell you what she promised at the Democratic National Convention. I am going to make the U.S. military more lethal than ever. More lethal than ever. More unjust. More coups. More invasions. More submission of the world's population to the military might of the United States imperialists. That's what she promised. We are not out here campaigning for any candidate. We're out here today for justice. We're upholding the idea that humanity can do much, much, much better than Guantanamo, much better than Rikers Island, much better than funding genocidal wars, much better than standing by while people are ill and starving and dying of polio, potentially, dying of other diseases that are not fostered except in wartime, when people are being rounded up in prison camps. Yes, they call them refugee camps. They're prison camps. Gaza is a prison camp. We're here today about Guantanamo, but we cannot help but speak about all the crimes that our government has carried out in our name, and the importance of reaching more and more people to say, look, wake up. This is going on for 23 years. Nobody voted on it. Nobody said, well, that's a brilliant idea. It just happened. And now upwards of $1 billion have been spent keeping several dozen men, most of them uncharged, locked up in another country that the U.S. controls a tiny part of. And why? Because U.S. laws do not reach there. This is outrageous. Today in Brussels, London, Mexico City, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Cobblesville, New York, Detroit, and Washington, D.C., among other places, we are doing a global vigil to demand close the U.S. prison torture camp in Guantanamo. People look at me, they ask us, Obama closed it. I think Obama closed it. He was gonna close it. You mean he didn't close it? No, he didn't close it. Nobody has closed it. It's gonna take the action of people demanding that it be closed, along with stopping all the other abominations done by our government in our name. We have some good flyers here with information that we hope interested people will take. Check out the websites. Come back the first Wednesday of every month. I'm going to break it up a little bit now. I would like to invite my sisters from the Raging Grannies, Metro New York, to have their message out here.
This man is anti-Zionist.
We are raging today. I'm going to pass this to our granny with the best voice.
Against AIPAC. Guys, support Islamic.
And I want to remember the Palestinian people who are now being tortured in Israeli prisons using the same techniques that the United States has used.
Long live Palestine!
Fellow healthcare workers, doctors, nurses. It's disgusting. Let's do 1, 2, 3. Why are we silent about Guantanamo? Detention is torture, that we all know. 30 men, we must let them go. Guantanamo must be no more. Guantanamo must be no more. 21 years, torture, brutality from their loved ones indefinitely is nothing left. Thank you. Another one. The Prison Industrial Complex, written by Alice Sutter.
They don't want you to know about him. They don't want you to know about him.
Sorry. Ready? 1, 2, 3. From the cells of Rikers Island to Guantanamo's SHU, we are locking down the people. We can make some room for you. Folks of color, Muslims, immigrants, now more activists are next. We keep our corporations rich, the prison industrial complex. We can change you without charges like Guantanamo detainees. No parole for political prisoners who stood up for what you believe. We round up hard-working immigrants and we send them far away. And we trump up terrorist charges to lock up Muslims every day. We send city kids to upstate jails, friends and family far away. We can beat them when we're in the mood, make them work for crappy pay.
but we'll keep big bankers free and rich so they can rob you once again. From the cells of Rikers Island to Guantanamo's SHU. We are locking down the people. We can make some room for you. Folks of color, Muslims, immigrants, now more activists are next. We keep our corporations rich, prison industrial complex. Thank you.
Shut down.
One more song. Alice has written this one as well. And there's a part for you in here. You'll pick it up pretty quick. Ready?
What's the next one?
Guantanamo, let's shut it down. Shut it down. That's your part. Shut it down. Guantanamo, let's shut it down. No charges, no trials, brutal and vile. Guantanamo, let's shut it down. Guantanamo, let's shut it down. Shut it down. Shut it down. Guantanamo, let's shut it down. Filthy and dirty, let's free the 30. Guantanamo, let's shut it down. Guantanamo, let's shut it down. Shut it down. Shut it down. Guantanamo, let's shut it down. Torn from family, held in misery. Guantanamo, let's shut it down. Guantanamo, let's shut it down. Shut it down. Shut it down. Guantanamo, let's shut it down. Endless grief, no hope for release. Guantanamo, let's shut it down. Guantanamo, let's shut it down. Shut it down. Shut it down. Guantanamo, let's shut it down. Our taxes pay, we say no way. Guantanamo, let's shut it down. New York City raising Granny.
Shut it down. Shut it down. Now.
Oh. 1 second here.
Thank you.
This is the global vigil to shut down Guantanamo, the U.S. torture prison opened by Bush, Cheney, and Rumsfeld in 2002 with almost 800 prisoners. A lot of them, we learned pretty quickly, landed in Guantanamo because the U.S. military flew over Afghanistan and Pakistan with flyers saying, you'll get $5,000 if you turn in somebody connected to Al-Qaeda. And that happened. People got turned in Pakistan and Afghanistan, hundreds of men. A lot of them were there doing Muslim relief efforts, doing educational projects, doing charity. Some of them were there teaching. Some were farmers. It didn't matter. The U.S. rounded up 800 men and didn't know who they had because they had 6 Arabic speakers available to U.S. military intelligence. It was a mess. I have seen a lot of movies.
I would recommend watching it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's a movie the gentleman recommends we watch. You know what? Whether you know a little bit or a lot about Guantanamo, whether you know all the ins and outs and all the history and the stories of these men who have been cleared for release and are still sitting there after years and years, or whether you don't know very much, the idea that the U.S. locked people up in a remote island prison tortured them, and even developed new ways of torturing them. Got new authorization to develop things like walling, throwing people against the wall, waterboarding, force feeding, locking people in boxes, playing loud music for days at a time in people's ears. The fact that this happened should be enough for people who care about humanity to say, no, not in our name, not in our name. And nations all over the world have both looked at what the U.S. has done and been horrified, or in some cases they were part of it. I'll call names: Jordan, Poland, Thailand, Israel. They all cooperated with Guantanamo, a worldwide network of so-called black sites that ended in death for a lot of people we don't even know about, and ended in Guantanamo. So some countries really rejected that. Some were very much brought into the net and influenced by it, and were part of that network of vicious torture and repression. I would like to call up somebody who really has dedicated her life to human rights with the organization Amnesty International, my sister Deirdre. And here she is. New York City and New Jersey.
Thank you, Deborah. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the monthly first Wednesday of the month Guantanamo vigil and protest. We come out here every first Wednesday of the month at 5 p.m. right here to reach the public, to let you know that Guantanamo prison camp is still open. The United States taxpayers are paying millions and millions of dollars a year to keep this prison camp open in Cuba, because then we don't have to follow our own constitution. We don't have to follow our own laws by allowing the people who are detained there the freedoms that they're allowed by our constitution if they were on American soil. There are 16 prisoners who've been there for years, tortured, having ill health, no access to their family, being controlled every single minute of their day by soldiers that we pay the salaries of. And they're allowed to be released, but we haven't released them. They've been acquitted. They haven't been charged with anything. They've been found to be free to go, but we haven't let them go. There was a campaign promise of Obama and Biden, not that other guy in between, to close it. And we need to hold our politicians accountable for human rights. Human rights should be on the ballot. It's not just about Guantanamo, it's about all human rights. And we know all the other big issues that are going on in the world. But Amnesty International and the other organizations represented here, like the Raging Grannies who just performed for us, thank you, Raging Grannies. We need people's voices to unite. We need you, passers-by here in New York City, visitors from abroad, visitors from other states. We need you to hold our elected officials accountable for human rights. There are 30 detainees still left in Guantanamo, rotting away in prison, because we allow it. Us, our people, we are the democratically allotted people who can change things, but we have to make our voices heard. We have to get people to know that Guantanamo is still open, that Islamophobia is not acceptable in our country. All of the people there are Muslim. None of them have been charged with a crime. None of them have had access to their basic human rights for 23 years. This is unacceptable, and we keep paying for it. We keep electing people who are doing this to our own people, to our own citizens of the world. Please join us every first Wednesday of the month from 5 to 6 p.m. We're here. But go back to your people, go back to your friends, go back to your family. Talk to them about Guantanamo. Ask them, how much do you care about human rights? How much do you care about your own rights, your family's rights? Do we want to uphold our Constitution? Do we want to be fair to people? Do we want to have a loving and just society to raise our children in? Please don't deny, don't ignore the human rights abuses that are going on in the world, because it could happen to you next time. It could happen to you today. Thank you all so much for being here.
I think we should really think about, with all the people walking by who are, there's still a lot of tourists in New York City, right? Or again, there's a lot of tourists. Everybody who comes from somewhere else is affected. Your society is affected too. When you have the strongest military in the world, ever in history, able to hold people without charges in the way they've held people in Guantanamo. This is not just an example, it's really a threat. It's a threat to people around the world. It's a threat that you have this torture camp operating offshore of the United States, run by the U.S. military, not run by the Department of Justice. U.S. prisons are under the Department of Justice and the Bureau of Prisons. Guantanamo is under the U.S. military. Think about that for a minute. Military justice. Military justice is not the same as civil justice. And in this case, there's been very, very little justice. What justice has come has been fought for. Hundreds and hundreds of lawyers have gone into Guantanamo to help represent and free many, many prisoners. That did not happen because the grace of the U.S. military. Oh my God, we made a mistake. Never said that. They were backed down because people really, really argued over human rights. And this is extremely important to understand. Guantanamo would still have hundreds of men in it without the struggle of people on the streets, humanitarians, lawyers, and people in other countries protesting, even today in Brussels, in London, and Mexico City. People like us are protesting every month to shut down Guantanamo because they know it's a global thing. They know it is U.S. military might being illegitimately used around the world. And we're with them on that. This cannot be allowed to continue. It really can't. And people who know about it, I appreciate Deidre saying, if you know about it, you've got to talk about it. You've got to be part of the people that say no. And say humanity is capable of having a legal system that gives people, number one, the rule of law to count on, and the right to defend yourself, to know your charges, to mount a defense, and to be able to get out of prison. These people are trying to carry out the death penalty around the world with no jury, no defender. What has the U.S. military been around the rest of the world, to be honest, than an executioner? Freedom and democracy, okay, Hiroshima, Nagasaki, Dresden. I could start on the Congo. We could go through hundreds and hundreds of stories. And one of these stories is Guantanamo, and we're not giving up on that one story because people are still locked up there. It's still open. They're remodeling it, although apparently they had some big issue where they got to remodel it more. What's up with that? We don't know. Yeah. We're going to go through the numbers here before we hear more from the Raging Granny. Okay. They may have raged out. We'll see. They haven't aged out, but they may have raged out. Deidre.
What do you want to take? Thank you, Deborah. So Deborah has this flyer. We're handing out this flyer. If you want to learn about Guantanamo, we have a Guantanamo by the numbers flyer. These numbers are going to shock you. These are the figures as of September last year. 779. That's the number of men and boys, all Muslim, held at Guantanamo Bay, also known as Gitmo, the military detention facility, since it opened on January 11th, 2002. Next number is number 30. That's the number of men still held in detention at Guantanamo prison camp in Cuba. That's funded by U.S. tax dollars. Number 9 is the number of men convicted by Guantanamo military commissions. That's 9 out of 779. 4 is the number of men whose military commission convictions have been reversed in whole or in part by federal courts. They were the lucky ones who were able to get their cases heard in United States federal courts, and they were thrown out because we don't follow our own Constitution. 8, that's the number of men convicted by, oh, that's the one I just read. Sorry. Number 1, it's the number of men convicted and serving life sentences after military commission proceedings. Just 1 out of those 779 people who were tortured, who were captured, who were held incommunicado. And many of them are still suffering the after effects. People who have died or left, been able to get out of there, are suffering in other countries. They're pariahs in their own countries now, for no reason. Number 10, that's the number of men charged under military commission proceedings, but who still have not been tried. So there are 10 people charged out of that 779. 16 is the number of men still being held after being cleared for release by consensus of American national security agencies. So CIA, FBI, all those military guys, they all got together and they were like, yeah, these 16 guys are no threat. They can be released. But they haven't been released. They're still there. They're still suffering. And we're still paying millions of dollars every year for them to be there, being tortured in our name. 3 is the number of forever prisoners that were neither charged with a crime nor cleared for release. We have another 9. 9 is the number of men who have died at Guantanamo. 7 of alleged suicide, 1 of cancer, and 1 of an apparent heart attack. But these men have been tortured. They're in ill health. They don't have access to medical care, proper nutrition. They're suffering the effects of having been tortured and held in detention, in solitary confinement. The torture included things Deborah mentioned before, beyond beatings, just absolute control, wearing those black masks over their heads, not having access to sunlight, not being able to talk to their families. Okay, let's move on. Waterboarding, force feeding, they're horrible. Okay, so 31. 31 is the number of men known to have died since being transferred out of Guantanamo. $11 million. That's the estimated annual cost to hold a single prisoner at Guantanamo. And that's actually an old number. It's nearly 10 years old. So I'm sure it costs a lot more than 11 million US taxpayer dollars to hold one person at Guantanamo. $32,000. That's the estimated annual cost to hold a single prisoner in the federal prison system 10 years ago. So $32,000 to hold somebody in federal prison here in the United States, $11 million to hold a single prisoner in Guantanamo. That's the low ball figure. Okay, next number is 532. That's the number of men released by the Bush administration after they're the ones who rounded them up. 532. They realized we can't hold these guys there's nothing to hold them by. No trumped up charges would fit. 197 is the number of men released by President Obama. 1, the number of men released by President Trump. Former President Trump. Number 10 is the number of men released by President Biden. 13 is the age of the youngest prisoner held at Guantanamo. That's an 8th grader here in the United States. Anybody have kids going back to school today? Your 8th grader could have been put in Guantanamo and still be there 22 years later without you ever talking to them, finding out what happened to them, knowing how they are, watching them grow up. 89 is the age of the oldest prisoner held at Guantanamo. How many 89-year-olds do you know that could survive that? How many of you could survive that? 21 is the number of children held at Guantanamo. They put children in a torture prison camp off of the United States shores so that they could treat them illegally, torture them, children. And they kept them there. The next number is 5% of Guantanamo detainees were captured by American forces. 86% of the Guantanamo detainees were turned over to American or coalition forces for cash bounties. The estimate for the cost of those cash bounties to sell out your neighbor or somebody you didn't like or your business competitor, maybe you really didn't think they were a bad person, but you needed the money, $3,000 to $25,000 to sell out people to Guantanamo who have been rotting away there for 22 years now. Here's another number. At least 200 FBI agents reported abusive treatment of Guantanamo prisoners. 200 of our own federal agents admit and report to abusive treatment at Guantanamo. It's not fiction. Guantanamo has to close. At least 26 Guantanamo detainees were previously tortured at CIA overseas black sites before they came to Guantanamo to be tortured. At least $90 million is the annual cost to run Guantanamo military commissions with no end in sight. $90 million to talk about these prisoners. That's your taxpayer dollars. So we really urge you to help us bring human rights to the forefront, bring the message to people that you know that Guantanamo is still there. Grab one of our flyers to get all these numbers. You can look it up yourself. You can go to closeguantanamo.org. You can join us on the first Wednesday of every month right here at 5 p.m. We'll be waiting for your help. And we want you to hold our elected officials accountable. They're spending our money, our tax dollars, on torture. It's unacceptable.
Thank you, Deidre. This is the monthly global vigil to close Guantanamo now, which is happening during the genocide going on in Gaza for the last 11 months. And we are not silent about that either. Trudy?
At no time, I'm saying at no time in human history, what did I say? At no time in human history, at no time in human history
No time in human history.
Listen, I did this 30 years. We can do a little better. I'll try it again. At no time in human history has a government spent so much money. At no time in human history has a government spent so much money to lock up people. This sign says from Guantanamo to Gaza. This sign says from Guantanamo to Gaza. What does this sign say? This sign says from Guantanamo to Gaza. It's all right, I don't hear you. My pre-K kids were louder. Let's try it again. From Guantanamo to Gaza. That is what our government is doing. Taking our money.
That is what our government is doing. Taking our money.
That's why we have a coalition of people.
That's why we have a coalition of people.
Rev.com.
Rev.com.
What did she say?
What did she say?
Rev.com.
Rev.com.
War Resisters League.
War Resisters League.
Peace Action.
Peace Action.
Raging Grannies.
Raging Grannies.
Are we against the genocide?
Are we against the genocide?
Are we on the right side of history?
Are we on the right side of history?
All of us are on the right side of history.
All of us are on the right side of history.
Are you all on the right side of history?
Are you all on the right side of history?
Well, it turns out that most of you are on the right side of history. Most of you believe that our money should not be using to murder babies, adults, men, women, doctors, professors in Gaza, right? We all agree. This is an outrage. This is a genocide. So many of us are going to be meeting during UN Week. There is an International Peace Day on the 21st. I want to bring Redeema over here. Please, Redeema. She is redeeming me. No, I'm sorry. And she is working with Code Pink, with War Resisters, of which I am a member, with Raging Grannies, I am a member. We have Alice Sutter, a lot of us, and we are planning to raise a little noise while all the diplomats come to the UN between September 10th and September 27th. Jewish Voice for Peace has a very large event set up, and it's still a bit not discussed in detail, but it's at the end of September. Many of us will be involved with that. Many of us have been getting arrested with the elder Jews, and many of us are going to be at the South African Embassy. Where is that?
On 51st Street and 3rd Avenue on September 16th is the Uniting for Peace March, and that is going from the South African Embassy, supporting Gaza and fighting against the genocide in Gaza, calling to unite for peace. And then on September 21st, from the South African Embassy to the Israeli Embassy on 43rd and 2nd. And then on September 21st, Inspire Change, in collaboration with Code Pink and several organizations, are marching for peace, justice, love, and freedom on UN International Peace Day. And that starts at Dag Hammarskjöld Plaza, and that will be having its route throughout the city as well. So that will be representing international issues going on in the world and demanding the UN listen to the voices of the people and make a change about what's going on, because we can't have peace until we have justice, love, and freedom for all people. And so we're going to be uniting to march for peace, justice, love, and freedom on that day as well. So please join us.
So I'm hoping that on September 16th, you will join Alice and me and actually 9 other people who are doing a civil disobedience action at the Israeli mission. But we are meeting, all of us, at 1 o'clock at the South African Embassy mission, at the South African mission, which is located
52nd and 3rd.
51st and 3rd, and some of us who aren't able to walk to the Israeli mission, those of us that have trouble walking, we will meet you at the Israeli mission. I forgot to mention Kathy Kelly, who started this. She came to New York. She's living in Chicago now. She's one of our longtime heroes. So this is the monthly, almost the end of the monthly global vigil to close Guantanamo for September, in unity with people in cities around the world and around the U.S. demanding that the U.S. military and the U.S. government close Guantanamo now. They can't even hold trials. They can't even hold a trial because even the military trial judges say you can't have a trial when the defendant has been tortured because any evidence has been tainted by torture. Even the military trial judges are saying that. So there's not going to be trials that bring justice. To close out, I want to ask Rosemary Pace from Pax Christi to speak with us and for us.
Oh, we gotta go. We gotta still go.
I'm standing here watching people walking by and thinking, you're probably exhausted, emotionally, maybe physically, in a variety of ways. We're here to say close Guantanamo, but I have to admit, even I am feeling very tired of the state of this country, tired, frankly, of the state of my own church, tired of a whole lot of things, and overwhelmed by all the issues that we're dealing with. A lot of people think Guantanamo is a dead issue. It's obviously not. But to be very honest, one reason why I'm tired is I've been working on a report on a trip I took to Hiroshima and Nagasaki earlier this year, where the U.S. dropped atomic bombs and leveled 2 cities in Japan. And I'm working on a report back, and in the process, I'm also reviewing my notes because Nagasaki was the biggest Christian community in Japan, still is, and for 200 years, from the 17th to the 19th centuries, Christianity was prohibited. And when I think about that, and I think about the dropping of bombs, and I think about Guantanamo, and I think about Gaza, I come up with 2 questions. One is, why on earth do we never learn? What on earth is wrong with humanity that we never learn? We keep doing the same thing over and over again and wonder why things don't change, why things don't get better. We're making the same idiotic mistakes that we've made at least for centuries. It's time that we wake up and change how we behave. And one of those things occurred to me the other day at a rally for Gaza, which is, why can't we have some empathy for each other? Why can't Israelis recognize that Palestinians bleed too? They suffer, they cry, they lose their families and feel heartbroken. Why is it that Palestinians forget that Israelis suffer too? Why is it we forget about the suffering of the people in Guantanamo? Why is it we forget about the people who suffer every day in different ways? How different would this world be if we actually cared about one another and recognized each other's sufferings? How different would it be if we didn't just turn our backs on people and turn our backs on their suffering? We need to stop making the same mistakes over and over and over again, and we need to start caring about one another. And when we do that, think about how much better a world this could be. Thank you, Rosemarie. This has been the New York instance of the monthly global vigil to close the U.S. torture camp in Guantanamo now. To close it now. This is our demand across the country, and my friend here reminded me that next month, the first Wednesday of October, will be 8,300 days since Guantanamo was opened, which is close to 23 years. And some of the prisoners there have been in a U.S. black site or Guantanamo for those 23 years, with no conviction, in some cases no charges. This is completely outrageous, and as we've related today, it's not just bad for those men, almost 800 who were held, and their families. It's really bad for humanity. And to draw the point out, when the strongest country, the strongest military in the world can get away with holding people with no charges for decades and never giving them justice, even when they're released. We're passing out information on the men who have been released, who have been sent to countries where they know nobody, their relatives can't join them, they can't get a job, they can't leave, they can't travel, they don't have papers. They're in Guantanamo 2.0, another prison. And this is all part of a piece for what has been designed to hold over the heads of people around the world, saying, you can't stand up against us. You can't take a stand against what the U.S. does, because you could end up in Guantanamo. And isn't the former orange-haired president somebody who said that? Why can't we put more people in Guantanamo? And he wasn't just talking about Muslim men. I mean, this is serious, people. You keep an institution like that open, it's a danger to the globe. So join us. CloseGuantanamo.org. Search Guantanamo online. Come the first Wednesday in October. It'll be the last time we start at 5. After that, every month we'll start at 4 because of daylight savings time. And I want to thank everybody who turned up today. Cold or rain, we keep showing up, and it's really important. People around the country and around the world are telling us they see our vigil. And family members of people in Guantanamo see our vigil, and they know that there's a core of people who are saying, no, close it now. Again, thanks everyone for coming, showing up. We can get more seating thanks to the New York Public Library. We have seating for hundreds. All right, good night everybody, good to see you. And I have a private message for all the vigilers that I won't put out on the mic.
Into a lovely jam called Deborah's Sweet Fig Jam. And I brought 6 jars, and I'm collecting donations for the children's library section of this.
อยากหน่อยเด้อ